Okay, welcome everybody. This is the May 14th, 2025 meeting, and we will get started. The first item is we have some minutes to review. Um, and John, do you want to take that on?
Certainly, yeah. I distributed minutes for our April 12th and April 29th regular meetings this weekend. And if no one has any proposed edits to those minutes, I move that we approve those minutes as distributed.
So moved.
Good. Any suggestions for changes? No? Okay, well, let's vote on that. Brian,
Yes.
Bianca,
Oh,
Bianca,
you're
you're on mute.
Sorry, I just checked. It looks like for some reason John's email went into my junk box and I didn't see it. But I just checked. I'm if everyone's okay, I'm sure I have no edits to make, and I am absolutely confident that these are fine. So
Okay,
we'll vote
great.
yes.
Thank you. And John,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. In addition to that, we have minutes of an executive board meeting that have been reviewed by the only three people who were there for the full meeting, which was Bianca, Brian, and me. We all said they were okay. Can I have a motion to approve those?
I move that we approve the minutes from the executive session. I don't have the date available.
That's okay.
Well, and just say approved but not to be released.
Approved, yes. Thank you. Bianca, can you second?
I second. Yep.
And can you approve?
Yes.
And Brian?
Yes.
And I approve as well. Good. Well, thank you. The next item on the agenda is my report. I'm going to keep it very brief. I just wanted to report, well, two things. One is I wanted to make sure folks know that Chris is not going to be here today at this meeting because he's on an airplane at the moment. And second, that we've had some conversations one-on-one about what will happen after town meeting, and which is a time when we normally look at whether to change leadership on the light board, and we are going to at least propose, but we'll see. It'll have to be approved by the board at the next meeting that I will remain as chair and John will remain as clerk for another year. With that, let me turn it over to Jason for his report.
Thank you. First, I wanted to take just a second to introduce Nan Okarma, who is our new financial manager / accountant. Nan started at the end of April, and she was actually at our last meeting, but it was so focused on SMUD, we didn't want to detract. But Nan is here and will be working with us on the audit very soon and also on the budget and forecast process that happens later this year. So we're super excited to have Nan on board. I wanted to give,
Well,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just going to say welcome. It's great to have you.
I wanted to give an update on the Concord Middle School solar project. We were pretty optimistic as we were on the agenda for last night's school committee meeting. I was in attendance, but they did not take up the agenda topic. They seemed to be confused that the assistant superintendent had sent out a red line version of the agreement as well as the final agreement. And they immediately moved to delay this to the next meeting, which is on the 20th next week. I can't explain what the motivation was, but they seem to be eager to move on to the next topic. And did not give me an opportunity to speak. And Bob did try to salvage it, but the chair decided to punt this to next week. So hopefully we can get this taken care of next week and the superintendent can execute the agreement. We are ready to go with the RFP. So if any people want to attend the meeting on the 20th, you're welcome to do so. There have been a lot of developments in the last month since we met last for our full meeting at the state and federal level relating to the energy and electric utility sector. The governor, for example, just announced yesterday a very big piece of legislation. If you want to look it up, the current number is HD 4707. It's 119 pages and it was released yesterday. So we're still carefully reviewing this to see what provisions it has in it, but there are definitely some impactful changes if this were to be adopted to CMLP and to the entire energy sector. I think that even though the legislature had thought that they might focus more on kind of smaller pieces of legislation that were more targeted after a couple of years in a row where they had very large omnibus energy bills, the governor is facing a lot of pressure from consumers about high costs for energy. So there's a lot in there that seeks to lower costs by restructuring things and even allowing some of like the Mass Save program things to be turned into commodities. So there's some interesting approaches in there, and I'm sure that it will change before anything gets approved and signed into law, but it's definitely something that we'll keep an eye on. The other thing I wanted to mention is something I wrote to the board about earlier, that the EPA was looking at ending the Energy Star program, which has been very popular to help consumers understand which products they could buy that might save them on energy costs. And people are looking to find ways to fill that void if the program were to be dismantled. And the EPA is also looking at a lot of kind of rules on emissions and carbon emitting sources. So there's definitely some changes happening on the federal level that we are all staying on top of. Another thing I wanted to mention, I do see Eric here on the meeting today. This is something that's been brewing in the town for a while, and I wanted to let the board and the public know about it from the CMLP perspective. But the town is looking at maybe entering into an agreement with an energy services company to help the municipal buildings get retrofitted for new HVAC and other efficiency, equipment and utility generating equipment. And the goal here is, usually to lower the costs for energy and also lower the greenhouse gas emissions and inventory. So that would be a win-win for the town. I think it's a little different in MLP territories simply because we have lower rates than the IOUs and the rebate structure is going to be a little bit different than what some of these bigger companies are used to. But we've had a couple meetings with Eric and Russ, our facilities director in town, to talk about this, and CMLP is eager to be a partner as the town looks to try to cut its greenhouse gas emissions and see how we can, further electrify some of the buildings. We continue to work with Concord Public Works on their rollout of a stormwater enterprise. Warren mentioned the warrant and the town meeting that's coming up in a couple of weeks. This is one of the big articles that will be on discussed at town meeting with the goal of basically creating the budget for the stormwater utility. This is big for us because we will be essentially, billing this in our system, and then our customer service will be tasked with taking those phone calls and helping out with folks. So there's been a lot of coordination with Public Works, with CRC, our current call center vendor, with NISC to get the programming and the software in, and Carol and Donna and others on the team are doing a great job on that project. One exciting thing is, if you'll all remember, last month, Jan Assetti and Pamela Cady were here to say hello from Energy Management. And one of the things that Jan shared was this heat pump story map, which was an online ArcGIS resource that has been published and is live for people to take a look at. There's a link in the packet under the CMLP updates and energy management section. A big thank you to Jan, Pamela, Laura, and the team for getting that together. And it really shows the hard work that's been done over, a decade or more of trying to get heat pumps out there. And also a big thank you to the GIS team for, displaying the capabilities that they have and the data that we have. For advanced metering, we have 9 meters left to install. Great job to Annie, Johnny, Carol, and the whole team. We're very excited about that. 4 or 5 of these, I think, have special meter sockets, and we're going to need to do some work on those. But there's just a couple of opt-outs and a couple of regular meters to go, and then we'll kind of have to do the others as the customers replace their meter sockets. Our audit was scheduled, our on-site audit was scheduled for this week. The auditors had to push that out. They actually have a new person who's been assigned to our audit, and he just started last week. And so it should be in the next few weeks that we kick this off, and they're pledging to try to meet our timeline to make sure that we can get our DPU report done on time and that we can get our budget cycle kicked off. I think last year we had months of delays due to the national review, and they have pledged to clean that process up and make sure we don't get bogged down. So we should be well ahead of where we were last year. And then hopefully next year, if we have a stable process, then we can get back to kind of being done almost in June, which is what the goal is each year. In terms of hiring, we have an accepted offer for our 3rd customer service specialist. And that person is going to be starting in just a couple of weeks, I think early June. So that's exciting. And then we have a network engineer who has accepted an offer and is working on the pre-employment screening. And with that, we're going to be have all vacant positions filled except any new positions that the board has been talking about for the last few years. So we'll be turning our attention to that, and also the recruitment for Carol's replacement once she retires. And then the last thing I had was just the town meeting warrant updates. So I did present at the enterprise hearing for the finance committee, and that went very well. There were a few questions, and the moderator has decided that this should stay on the consent calendar. So we don't anticipate any discussion or any concerns from the town meeting. Obviously, the body can remove it from the consent calendar if voters so choose, but I doubt that that will happen. There are no other specific CMLP articles that I think people need to be aware of, but there are a lot of kind of adjacent ones that may impact in small ways the light plant. And I mentioned the stormwater utility, that's one. There's a couple of citizens petitions, zoning bylaws. I think the MCI work is going to definitely impact CMLP, as well as the citizens petition for the rezoning of the Newbury Court. We're looking at 2 large 40B projects right now that could bring up to 400 units of new housing in Concord. And with our electrification requirements and the stretch code, these are all going to be electric, residences. So with Newbury Court, there could be a couple hundred more. So that would be 600, new residences coming online in the next few years. So definitely going to impact us, hopefully all in good ways. There's 58 articles. It's going to be a long town meeting over 3 nights. Bring your seat cushion and some water and snacks. But I didn't have anything else specific. But if people have questions about the town meeting, just let me know. And that's all I have one.
Any questions about that, or any questions or comments about anything else in Jason's report? Brian?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the heat pump information webpage. I think it's awesome. I think it's laid out well. It tells a great story and has a lot of good detail. So definitely take a moment to check it out.
Good point. Good point. Anything else? Well, let's go on to the broadband report. We're going to have a larger broadband discussion later in the meeting, but let's hear what's been going on. Dale, are you giving this?
We actually had taken that off the agenda, Warren, in favor of the larger update later in the meeting. So,
Oh, okay.
agenda.
I saw it's still on the agenda, but
I
maybe.
apologize.
So, but that's good. Oh, right, you're right. I got it. Thank you. So now what we're going to turn to is the SMUD presentation at the last meeting. It was a very useful event, and I want to thank Laura for arranging it. And we did not at the time get a chance to debrief from that presentation or get any reactions, and I wanted to give board members and staff an opportunity to give any reactions they might have to the SMUD presentation and what we learned at that meeting. Brian.
I really appreciated the presentation. It really shows how time of use can work, can really inform customers and give them choice to make decisions that benefit both them and the utility. And it's not as earth-shattering of a change as some may have thought 10 years ago. It does require the smart meters, the data to be organized, to have our back end systems in order prior to releasing a time of use rate. But it can be very beneficial. And I thought it was a great presentation.
Great, thank you. Bianca.
Yeah, likewise, I thought it was a great presentation. One of the things that I really appreciated about their work is the thoughtfulness with which they communicated to residents, the tools that were available to residents to reduce their energy needs, and also the reliability and stability of the rates itself. I think that our rates move a little bit too quickly, too fast. From one board to the next, we tend to change a lot. And I'm wondering if with time of use, it's going to be a pretty dramatic change. And if we can't find a way to make it, something that it's, we know that this is going to be a rate that's going to be stable for 7+ years or something like that. To allow people just, yeah, to plan and adjust. And I think that adjustment process, uh, well, it's difficult and takes time.
Good, thank you. John.
Yeah, no, I'd like to echo some of the thoughts. I mean, it was really a great presentation. Appreciated the focus. To me, one of the messages that clearly came through was the simplicity, the fact that they focused on 3 hours. I wonder to the degree to which the situation in California might lend itself to a stable 3 hour period better than the situation here in New England, and recognizing that California has, what's commonly called a duck curve and results in, significant needs for capacity in the kind of the, late afternoon, early evening hours. But I think that there are a lot of useful lessons that can be learned. I just want to make sure that when we apply them, if we're going to apply them here, that we need to make sure that the circumstances are similar. So.
Thanks. I agree with a lot of these comments. I thought it was excellent to learn how they were approaching things there in Sacramento. Um, I thought we should give consideration. I didn't have an opinion on it, but give consideration as to whether we call it time of use rates or time of day rate, which is what they call it there. Um, and, you know, I don't know which will be better, but we should think that they did a lot of research and there may be some advantages to that. Secondly, echoing what John and Bianca are saying in particular, when proposing time of use rates, there's going to be a balance between precision and simplicity. And I was really won over by their materials to the simplicity side of things, that it's going to be much better for getting a strong customer response if we could present rates in a way that make them seem easy to follow and especially give attention to the really high cost hours that we want people to stay away from. Those was my takeaways. I don't know whether Laura or Jason, there's anything else you want to add or anyone else.
I think that I appreciate, Warren, your question about calling it time of use or time of day. And the sooner we figure things out like that, the easier it will be for us to start the messaging campaign, which hopefully will start in the next couple of months for people. And we do have an agenda topic to talk about this in a little bit, just to give some updates, and maybe the board can weigh in on that at that time. But I agree with what's been said, and I think that they have Warren, I think you ended the conversation with saying that you'll probably see your fingerprints on what we do, and I agree with that because they did put so much thought and time into these things. And I also agree with John's point that it's not all going to line up perfectly with our rollout, but it would be foolish not to learn from their lessons learned, and the research that they did that will be very universal. So I very much appreciate it.
I also noticed that they used focus groups quite a lot in how they design their messaging. And it resulted in things that I wouldn't have selected. So, putting noon as the beginning of the charts and time of day versus time of use. Those things came out of focus groups, and I don't think if we kind of brainstormed ourselves, we would have come up with those decisions. So I think focus groups with some customers would be a good idea for us to do. I don't know how we do that, but it's something to consider.
Good point. Good point. Well, if there's nothing else, let's move on to some time of use updates.
Great. I'm actually going to present my screen in a second to kind of talk about some things, but high level, we're going to give updates on the work we've been doing with NISC on updating the kind of bill print and the programming that goes into what the customers will see. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the marketing campaign and the awareness campaign. And then going to be talking a little bit about the cost of service study and where we are with that. So for the bill print, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see this bill now?
You got it.
Okay, great. So early on, what NISC does is they do mock-ups where they take an existing bill and they try to represent the requests that we're making to them. And then later they turn that over to a team of programmers who get the data that we're looking for, and make sure that they present it correctly. So what we're looking at here is just that. It's a mock-up of an existing bill where they've tried to take into consideration some of the feedback that we've given them so far. So I'll tell you kind of what they've done, what they're working on now, and then the reason for this update is not just to show you that we've been working on this. I hope you know we are almost every day, but also just to get some feedback. So if anybody has any suggestions or feel like we're going in the right way or the wrong way, these are the types of opportunities that you have to let us know. So one thing that is important, I think, that Brian has mentioned several times in the past is this table is very helpful to show the meter readings, on different times of day. I think obviously it's hard to have the reading for the peak periods, but having as much data as we can get into a table so that people can break it down and do their own analysis. Lacking data, they're going to just see a number, and there was feedback that we wanted to keep as much information there as we can, but kind of keep it out of the way so that if you want to ignore that, then you can. If you have multiple meters, they would show up below the in the last meter entry in this table. The other thing was the colorful graph here that shows, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit for you guys, that shows the time of day the energy is used within the month, whether it's peak, mid-peak, off-peak, mid-peak, or on-peak. We talked a lot about the colors and a lot about the order and putting off-peak on the base to try to send the message that let's think about that as the kind of your base usage, and that the mid-peak and on-peak are stacked on top of that. And the kind of the green, yellow, and orange are indicators of cost, right? Your green is going to be your cheapest, green is go, green is good, and then it gets more expensive after that. So you'll be able to kind of visually see why your bill is getting high. Even if you didn't have a lot of usage in a particular month, that bill might have been higher because you used a lot more on peak. The one problem that they're having in programming is getting that third, we'll call it April because this is an April bill, that third April on this graph. So we wanted this April, last April, and then the April from a year before. They're saying that that seems to be not possible, but they're still going to confirm that. If it's not possible, one other solution that we had was in this energy usage comparison, if we choose to keep this, they could put the number of kilowatt hours used in that period down here from 2 years ago. So here you have an example where you see this month was this many kilowatt hours, this month last year, and then this month 2 years ago. So we're trying to see if we have an option to put it in the graph. If not, there might be another place where we could kind of tuck that away. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was this table of information on the right over here, where you see the starting with the power cost factor. We're trying to clean this up, and Carol and Laura and I have a thread about that. We're trying to break things up into kind of logical groups, keep the peak, mid-peak, off-peak in a very clear area, and not have this as busy as it is, and try to label things a little bit better. So we're kind of going back and forth between having more rows that'll be easier to understand versus fewer rows that'll be a cleaner look. And so on the next iteration of this, you will likely see some dramatic changes in this area with the reordering and restructuring of this table to try to make it a little bit easier for customers to understand. I think anybody in this meeting has probably looked at this a lot, and this makes complete sense to them. But somebody who's looking at their bill for the first time, this just might look like nothing to them. So, and explaining power cost factor, service charge, the NYPA power cost adjustment, things like that. We just need to find a better way to present that. So that's kind of the area that we're working on now. There is a portion of the bill that has to stay, like the right to dispute. This can obviously move down a little bit. It doesn't have to be so prevalent, but this is kind of the bill print area or progress that we have so far. Maybe I can pause here, Warren, and just, since we have it up on the screen, get some.
Yeah, that's good. Any comments or questions?
I have a few. So I'm glad to hear you're working on the third April being displayed in the graph. That's the ideal place for it. It's interesting. I thought that getting the data was going to be the issue, but it sounds like displaying the data in the graph is the issue. So that's great. I don't like showing all the on, off, mid in the graph, but I know the board generally does, according to our last meeting. So I'm fine with that. I would like to see degree days, some understanding of outside temperature, because weather is such a factor in energy consumption. With the table on the right, um, is there any way to add a small title for 3 sections saying distribution, energy, and fees or surcharges? Just some kind of title, and then group those line items in those areas. So we could see the service charge and distribution charge next to each other, because that's what pays for the operating of the light plant, and have the peak, mid-peak, off-peak in a section, and then have NIPA underground in the power factor in the third section as kind of a way for people to understand what they're paying for in those different groups. That might be a good way to organize that. And I do like the table. No, that's perfect. That's installers for solar and heat pump people will really love that when they talk to customers. Those are my thoughts. And I
Thank
think
you. John,
sorry, one final question. The next page in the packet is another rendering of this page. Is that for the opt-out customers?
No, this is a water, this, because it's just a bill.
Oh, sorry, it's a water. I didn't see the
So
water.
ignore that page. We're just looking at the electric.
Well, it would be good to
To see,
know
yeah.
what opt-out customers would see.
Yeah,
John,
I was happy to hear that further considerations given to how to emphasize the peak, mid-peak, and off-peak, right? That to me is the ultimate message that we're trying to drive home here. So I feel like if there's a way to really emphasize that aspect in the bill so that customers can understand the fact that their consumption during the peak period is really what's driving their rate, and to really highlight those rate differences. And I will leave it up to staff in terms of, how best to do that, but I just feel like that's really a kind of a key objective of what we're trying to convey here to customers.
thank you. Bianca,
There we go. So a couple of thoughts. And I hear what Brian and John are saying, and I have some slightly different thoughts. I think that 2 years in the graph is just too much. But if we have that added bubble there this month, 2 years ago, that might be helpful. I think also in terms of degree days, that's a very sophisticated level of analysis, which might be very helpful for Brian and some others in town. But I think that for the average consumer, they're not going to be making any calculations. And, in general, we know what season it is. And, we might remember, oh, last winter was particularly bad, or this one, so we might have that memory. But apart from that, I think it would be information overload probably for the average consumer. And I agree that these off-peak, mid-peak need to be highlighted. I'm happy with the way that it's highlighted here. I think it's pretty clear. However, I would suggest an insert, at least for the first year, that would show again the times of day, something like when SMUD had it, they had a very prominent from this hour to this hour, reduce your usage. And if we just have like an additional insert that just highlights the times from, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m., reduce your usage. Something like that would be probably just keep the times of day in mind, because that might be, if it's not listed here, even if it were listed here, there's already too much information. So that's it.
thank you. Yeah, I agree with a lot of Bianca's comments here. Personally, I'm comfortable with having the 2 years ago in the graph below, which is giving the key information for people that they need, which is, hey, how much does their total usage compare this year, last year, and the year before? If it can't easily be put on the colored graph, that's fine with me. It seems like we really need some help with all the charges on the right to make it clear and emphasizing, there are some things on that cost this customer $80, $76. there's some things that cost them $1 that are a charge of $1.88. The ones we want them to be able to see are the ones that are $76, $80, not these small things that don't make a big difference in their total bill. Um, the type size on right to dispute your electric bill is the same size, if not bigger, than the chart above. Um, it seems like it should be smaller and the chart should be greater. I also agree with Bianca. It would be good to, I mean, even without a big statement, there should be somewhere on this bill that says what are the on-peak, off-peak, and mid-peak hours for that month, so people know what they are. Finally, I don't know if we want to do something a little more dramatic on the appearance of this bill. Um, in terms of style, it looks like it comes from a 1990s inkjet printer. And can we do something that looks a little more modern and contemporary and um, better? But Brian, were you going to say anything more?
Yeah, so where it labels in the table peak, mid-peak, off-peak, we could add in the hours of the day, maybe, if it fits. But more importantly, I think we have to label those as they're seasonal. So we're going to have a winter price and a summer price for those categories. So each of those labels should say, S or W or summer or winter. Um, and it might be a good place to put the times if you want to show times on this.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can I ask one question? Are the bills always monthly bills with all the days in the month?
Carol, do you want to discuss the billing groups and how that works? The different cycles.
Um, yes, so the number of days per month can vary a little bit. We do have 3 different billing cycles, though. We bill on the 10th, the 20th, and then the last day of the month. But those days per month can actually vary a little bit by, a day or two, usually less rather than more days per month.
Okay, thank you.
And, and
Bianca.
yeah, I've used those day part of the table to do billing on my Excel sheets.
So I was going to suggest, in terms of the advertising, or marketing, I don't know what you call it, marketing advertising for the seasonal, that we probably should use only one season. And I'm guessing that's going to be our winter season. That's going to be the hefty one. I mean, unless unless staff really thinks otherwise, I think it'd be simpler. And a tagline that might be catchy, and get people to remember is "Winter is coming." If we use the "Winter is coming" tagline, um, might be it might catch on, in terms of
That's a good possibility. We got to see what the cost of service study
okay.
says in terms of what the rate differential is summer to winter. But if there is a significant one, then that is a good idea. Anything else anybody wants to say about this bill? Well, Jason, let's go back to the rest of
Yeah.
what you wanted to talk about.
Sure, thank you. So in the marketing updates, I wanted to let everyone know we are retaining the services of Questline, which is a very professional marketing firm that has a lot of experience actually rolling out time of use rates for electric utilities. They have a library of materials already created and will be creating custom materials for us. There's going to be 3 phases that we're going to be doing. One is kind of an awareness campaign that will start over the summer to get people aware of what's coming and be kind of a preview. The second campaign is going to be a 90-day, 60-day, and 30-day before we go live, where there'll be kind of a wave with each month before, successive month before we go live on January 1st with the new rates, to let people know, and it will include performance metrics for us to give us an indication of the level of engagement that we're seeing among the customers. And then it will be custom and dynamic to what we're doing. And so depending on what you have, you might get a different information than somebody else. So if you have EVs enrolled in this program, or if you are already on a different rate over here, there can be targeted messaging that go to different folks. So as the board chews through time of use and what it will or won't replace, we're not just going to be having to message time of use, because other rates may be changing or going away. And so there's going to be more communication, and that can be targeted so that we're not wasting people's brain space with things that don't apply to them. So that's good. And then finally, there'll be a post go live period where in January, especially, there'll be a big campaign to make sure that people are going to understand their bills, and there'll be basically weekly information on that. Our February through December, we're still figuring out. There is a package for that. We're going to hold off just a little bit while we keep talking about what that will look like and what their services are. They kind of had a package and it didn't seem to fit perfectly with us, but we definitely want to keep that messaging going from February through December of next year, at the very least. And there will be things like bill inserts and banner ads on the website and messaging through Smart Hub and other places. So Carol is taking the lead on communicating with Questline and getting this set up, and the procurement should be pretty simple because it's services only, which is easy to procure for the light plant. So Carol or Laura, did you want to add anything else on Questline, or did I summarize that adequately?
I don't have anything further to add.
Okay.
I think you summarized that well. Thanks.
Okay. Laura, while you're unmuted, do you want to give an update on the cost of service study and where we are on that?
Sure. I just had a call yesterday with our project lead for, excuse me, an assessment in our wished for timeline that we issued with our request for pricing and the scope of work for the ensuing consultant proposal. We had indicated that we wanted the cost of service study to be completed around May 12th, which was Monday. And we are very close. There are 4 or 5 items left on a tick list that I need to get over to them. So we're probably running about a week late, not due to any fault of the consultant. The major hangup has been in trying to figure out how to get the MDM data aggregated and sent over to the consultant by rate class. We went through a lot of painful learning and failures before we finally came up with a solution just last week. So we have just barely sent them over that data, and they just need to incorporate that. But Mike, our project lead, was fairly confident that he could, once he gets the data, he can incorporate it. He's done almost everything, all the build out to the model. He can just incorporate those last items on the tick list within one work day. And they need to do an internal review, which will probably take a couple days. So conceivably, we could be done by Friday, or it could be sometime early next week. But I don't think that's going to delay the overall larger schedule, because rates were not due to be back until May 26th. And the first glimpse that the board will have of this will be at your June 9th meeting. UFS, our consultant, is going to be presenting their first draft report to you at that time. And so they will prepare, they will recommend how they see rolling out time of use. They will come up with the number of peak periods, the seasons, and the prices, and a justification for those, which the board obviously will then consider. And then there'll be an iteration that goes back, and they can make some adjustments based on the board's findings. This company in particular is a big believer in a gradualist approach, which Bianca, I think you will appreciate. So in other words, if their time of use suggests that we have to go from our current 22 cents to 60 cents for the on-peak period, there's no way that we're going to go to 60 cents year one. That will not be their recommendation. They will say that, the 5-year hope for landing point is 60 cents. And here's a 5-year schedule on how we would get there. And so they like predictability, they like gradualism, for the reasons that you cited, Bianca, in terms of customer receptivity. So we still hope to have our final report completed by July 23rd, which means the rates will be locked down and we can begin that advertising campaign to the customers. We can tell them not only that time of use is coming, but we can begin to preview, the number of seasons and the prices for each one of those, which is an important component of the information that we need to present to the customers. Things that could delay this is, and I was given a word of warning last night. Mike said he's not sure if it's a Massachusetts thing, but he said with 2 other Massachusetts utilities that he didn't name, the boards could not come to a decision on what they wanted. They just kept going back and forth, back and forth. And he said that delayed things for months. And so we just have to be mindful of that. They're going to come to you with a recommendation, a professional recommendation. You all need to consider, everything that you do in terms of rate setting, and hopefully in one meeting come to a consensus on what changes you want to see. And it'll be important to keep the project moving along by not, revisiting topics multiple times or needing, additional meetings to hash out what the board consensus is.
Thanks. Any questions or comments for Laura? John?
Yeah, I can imagine that I'm going to be, Laura, very interested in terms of the cost analysis that supports the suggestions for the various peak periods. And I think to the degree that, we can understand how that analysis was performed beforehand, it will reduce, the likelihood that we're going to come back with questions or be unable to kind of make decisions. I feel like if we have underlying comfort with the methodology and the appropriateness of the numbers, then the only question is, that some of the strategic issues that you raised, what is an appropriate path to get to the right number? So
Yeah.
just a thought.
Can I say, yeah, thank you. I wanted to follow up on something related to this and something Laura said. I'd like be very curious to see the results. I question the gradualist approach if it's too gradual, because the message we want to be given to customers is this is a big change. We don't want to give the message, oh no, don't worry, nothing much has changed. You don't have to do much different. And we don't want it to be like the frog in boiling water, where it changes so gradually that 5 years down the road, they haven't changed their behavior because it's happened so gradual. So I hope you convey that message to them, that it has to be clear that this is a big deal.
So I had that very discussion. I had lunch with the UFS folks when I was out at the APPA Business and Financial Conference, just a APPA lunch, and I went over and sat at their table, and we had this very discussion. And I was on your side, Warren. I was like, frog in boiling water. If we don't make it, stark, people won't change their behavior, and then we will get the boiled frog at the end of the 5 years or whatever, which is not a good outcome. But over the months, I've been slightly moving towards understanding their point of view. I mean, if you think about, okay, we want to give people time to acquire and adopt these shifting technologies, whether they're Nest thermostats or timers on the water heaters or, the tools that they would need. You need to give them some time to acquire those. And so, that could be one argument in favor of doing it slightly more gradually. But this is definitely a robust debate that we could be having even before we know the outcome of the cost of service study to help us figure out what is the consensus of the board going to be.
Yeah.
I would just like to echo John and Warren's comments. I think I get the gradual point you're making, Laura, but I do want people to pay attention, and generally they don't. But as for the board waffling on decision making, I think giving us
Your word, not mine.
but giving us good information that we have time to digest prior to the meeting, and not surprising us in the meeting with you got to make a big decision quickly without full context. Avoiding that will help us avoid waffling. And
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we can do something that will be helpful to those of you who are, very into the numbers on exactly what the methodology was. I mean, no surprise to you, it's going to be based on capacity factors, of the different rate classes, and also on historical LMPs. You've got both the assignment of capacity and transmission expense, which is one exercise, but then you also have to recognize the difference in the cost of energy, which we won't go into, Brian, because I know how you feel about that. But that will be a component of it. Another topic you all could be considering as the current makeup of the board is the question of the cross subsidy. Previous cost of service studies have shown that that each rate class is not paying its cost of service, and that basically the commercial rate classes are paying more than their cost of service and the residential are paying less. And the decision of the board back in 2018 was to continue that cross subsidy. But to the extent we really want to follow our cost causation principles and everybody pay their fair share, is that something you want to change? And we want to move more towards the cost of service, because I've taken a sneak preview at the current cost of service, and it's going to show a similar cross subsidy, which actually gives me some heart that all the other ones were done correctly, because they all show the same thing.
Right. Bianca.
Yeah, so two things just to comment real quick on what Laura mentioned about equal. There's a difference between equal and equity. So those are two very different concepts. And I think we will hopefully have time to debate that in the board meetings. And then in terms of gradualism, it's not for me, it's not about like slowly raising rates on people, but allowing time for marketing. So if we start marketing, advertising, I don't know what the word is, but to get the information out to people. So I think if we start, then we could potentially start a marketing campaign for time of use or time of day, whatever we want to call it, way ahead of when the rates change, so that we're signaling to people, hey, January 2026, or what's it, March 2026, whenever it is that we implement this, it's coming, get ready. Nest thermostats, maybe we offer some kind of incentive for people to buy the Nest thermostats, but just to give them time to get accustomed to it, because I think it's going to be confusing, and we could potentially on the back end be dealing with a lot of angry residents emailing, showing up to board meetings that that's not how we don't want this to be a bludgeoning and shock. Nobody likes, you're not going to shock anyone into changing behavior. You can coax them into it. And if we start the marketing early, that's just give people time. We need the time. Maybe we don't have all our ducks in a row yet, but we know that change is coming. And so just get that out to people as soon as possible.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, I think one thing that's going to influence how I feel in terms of the appropriate degree of gradualism is appropriate is the degree to which customers have tools available to them to kind of respond to these price signals. And right, one of the programs that is I believe the Life Plan is rolling out is this MWAC program to really kind of support that. So I feel like it's and it kind of goes back to Bianca's point. I feel like it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that we're making customers aware of all the tools that are available to them, and really, supporting their effort to change their behavior.
Great. Thank you. Anything else in this agenda topic? No, well, let's move on to the broadband reports. Oh, no, the local control discussion. Sorry.
Thank you. Can you see the slide here?
Yep,
Okay.
we got it.
Great. Let me just go a little bit into this, and I'll try to make this brief. This is really just for the board to be aware of something that's happening in the broader municipal light board and commission sector. So there have been some recent examples of state initiatives that have been seeking to expand programs that are traditionally only operating in IOU territory into, and that's investor-owned utility territory, moving into the municipal light or MLP territory. And I have a few examples here on this slide. And I'm not going to go into all these in detail, but the large building energy reporting is one, which would require a utility to disclose the usage of their customers over a certain square footage. The clean heat standard, which does mandate some greenhouse gas emission rules and other things. The clean trucks regulation, which would prevent certain diesel vehicles from being purchased. It was originally meant to go into effect this year, but was delayed a couple of years. And then the potential decarbonization clearinghouse as a replacement to the Mass Save program. Previously, when things like this came out, there were carve outs for MLPs. And the reason for that, and I've got that on my next slide, is that MLPs historically have way outdone the investor-owned utilities in terms of their greenhouse gas emission reductions and their programs to incentivize energy efficiency and their support of the state's climate goals. And they've done so while offering higher reliability and lower rates than the IOUs. So some of these requirements have been perceived by others as very difficult to achieve and also potentially costing ratepayers more money and causing MLPs to have to pivot to achieving different goals than maybe they were on the trajectory of before. Chapter 164, which outlines the right for light plants to exist, has very specific legislation that says what MLPs can and cannot do. And some felt that there was kind of an overreach of some of the departments like DOER, Mass DEP, and others into these MLP territories. And the last little bullet point here I have is that the IOUs have thousands and thousands of staff. They have marketing arms to do focus groups. They have ways to research and do more cost benefit analysis with different programs. And they have the legal funds to kind of cover the unintended consequences of something if they run afoul of the law. So other MLPs have taken some action, and so I just wanted to let the board know about that and allow you guys to have a conversation about it. This conversation started at a meme meeting last quarter where some folks had said that their boards were eager to make some comments on this. And the questions that they were asking were, are there going to be further requirements that kind of go into the MLP territory? On their face, I don't think many people in Concord have problems with the goals of some of those programs that we just mentioned, but I think that some people were worried about the autonomy of local boards and committees and their ability to set rates and do what is prescribed under Chapter 164. And will MLPs have the resources to address them? So, for instance, in the decarbonization, Concord is ahead of all of its peers and the IOUs, and us having to meet certain goals and deadlines will not negatively impact us because we've already made that pledge. We've already achieved those goals, but others have not, and they have been planning on a particular milestone for this much and for that much, and so they're concerned about having to pivot. And then also, what about some of the conflicts that people see in the laws? And I just have one more slide, and this is to show what others have done. It's actually 14 now. I just got one yesterday from Danvers. So 14 of the 40 MLPs have had their boards write letters either addressed to the governor or to Mass DEP or other state agencies to let them know the benefits of local light boards and municipal light plants, and gently push back to say that they had concerns in some of these areas. So that's all I wanted to let the board know that was happening so that you were aware of it. I'll stop sharing here on my Zoom controls and just turn it over to you, Warren, to see if the board
Yeah,
has any comments.
I guess first, let's just take any clarifying questions for Jason, not that deal with what we might do, but if there are any questions about what this is all about and what the issues are. Brian, is yours a clarifying question or is a comment on what
Yeah.
we should do?
Yeah. So you had said that, because we're ahead on carbon reduction efforts, that this wouldn't impact us. I disagree a bit with that because what happens is they prescribe
I
how.
thought we were dealing with clarifying questions only now.
Well, let me just make my statement. We'll save some time.
Okay.
So sometimes the state will prescribe and dictate how things are done, which could have pretty big impacts on us. And I've heard these kind of, leave us alone. Every cycle, there's some kind of legislation that, the state wants to do to clean up energy, and they don't exclude MLPs, and the MLP say we're all snowflakes, leave us alone, we're doing good. You know, I generally see a lot of these people that these MLPs tend to be the ones that aren't doing a lot, that tend to get on board with this. But we will be impacted if they don't exclude us from some of this stuff. But at the same time, some of these MLPs do need to do more, and that's reason to include them. So that's my thoughts. Whatever that's clarifying or not clarifying.
Anybody else have any thoughts about this? John?
Yeah, I think that my comments are somewhat similar to Brian's. I feel like I have a hard time in terms of writing a letter or being part of a letter, signing a letter where we're making broad statements in terms of, stay off our turf. I feel like if there are one-off situations where the requirements are imposing upon us are onerous, given our size, the resources we have, we're not in a position to respond to those using an agency like Energy New England, then yeah, I think then it's appropriate to react. But I personally am not in favor of drafting a letter saying, we're public power. We shouldn't be subject to the same requirements as investor-owned utilities. I think that to some extent, some of these programs, are designed to achieve objectives that Concord embraces, and it would be appropriate for us in some instances to pursue these programs. And so I'm just really reluctant to kind of make a blanket statement here of stay off our turf.
Bianca?
Yeah, I think Brian and John's comments I hear them. I my perspective is slightly different in that I think that the MLPs are special, and we have less and less of them in the country. And to the extent that, yes, I agree that there's many more MLPs that should be doing more. We don't understand their constraints. I don't claim to know. Maybe it's just views on climate, could be a lot of different things. But in general, I actually would support just a stay off our turf. We're doing a great job. And if we had to respond to something that's more targeted or it would just take away from everything else we're doing. So I think in general, we're few. And I think we should be regulated differently. So.
Warren, can I make a
Oh.
clarifying comment?
Yeah.
In response to Brian, you're right, Brian, when I said that it wouldn't apply to us, I was referring to just one very small piece of one of those bullet points. The diesel trucks, our inability to get those or to pay more for them would impact us. The clearinghouse would definitely impact us. Some of these other programs would. And they're, to me, in my opinion, they're not at a place where they are causing harm or concern. There are more and more. And, Laura and her team have been working on some of the reporting for the distributed energy resources. And, there are more coming. And so we will do our best to bring these to the board's attention so that if the board feels like we need to react, that we can, or if something's going to impact us negatively. But I think this is a good discussion to have. And I think that it does feel a little different this time. I've only been to, a year's worth of meme meetings. In the past, I think there was like this cadre of groups who just felt like we're all about the low rates, and they would have a similar reaction to pretty much anything. But one thing that I like is that what I'm hearing is that it's not we don't like the programs. It's that we are different and we need to operate differently to be competitive. And here's how we're doing these things. And it may look a little different, but we're out achieving on all of these different metrics. And so I did like that they're taking a different tone, a little less combative and a little more just trying to say like, hey, we are in danger. We're an endangered species. And so I will continue to work to keep this information coming to the board if we ever have a concern. And then, yeah, that's all I want to say.
That's
Yeah.
very good to
Hey,
hear.
thank you, Jason. That's useful clarification. I am not hearing strong enough sentiment for producing a general statement at this time from the board. And on the other hand, it does seem like, Jason, you should alert us when there is something that's being suggested that you do think would be an inappropriate imposition. And then we may be in a stronger position to have an impact by saying, look, we haven't objected to some of these things, but now you're doing something that we think is inappropriate and would cause us problems. I don't know if others are comfortable with that.
Yes, with a wait and
I'm
see.
saying, good. Let's then move on to broadband.
Great. Sharing my screen again, and Dale and I are going to tag team a bit of this. And Dale is our broadband manager, and he's been with Concord for a few years now. And we are going through a transition period in terms of our equipment, and the broadband offerings have been quite static in our time. And that's kind of a point of pride that we have not raised prices or reduced services to our customers. We've been very even keeled, but market pressures and some other opportunities are definitely showing us this is the time to make some changes. And we wanted to offer some broad information to the board to digest now. And then our plan is to come back later in the year to really kind of show some more specific options and allow the board to kind of percolate with this rather than just like all right, we're going to change things. What do you think of this sort of approach? So today, these are the offerings that we have. There's a lot of tiers. There's 6 tiers for residential and 6 tiers for business. And you can see the speeds and the prices that we have. These tiers have largely existed since 2014. In 2023, just a couple of years ago, the board did add 2 higher speed services for residential and 1 higher speed for business. The bottom ones of each of those categories. And that was really in response to a lot of customers who were coming to us saying that the speeds we offered were not fast enough. And these speeds have been quite popular. We have about 100 customers combined on these new tiers of faster speeds. So I want to talk about the challenges and why we feel like we need to make some changes now. So first of all, there is kind of a customer expectation of faster speeds because they are seeing that, 10 years ago, maybe people had a laptop or two in their homes. Today, they're having smart devices, TVs, watches, phones, tablets, and
Cameras.
cameras, exactly, security cameras. And so there's just been an explosion of devices in homes and also an explosion in video streaming services, which consume a lot of bandwidth. And, meetings like this, everybody with their camera on, you're consuming a lot of bandwidth. And then we're also seeing the offerings of our competitors, the Comcast and the satellite-based internet providers, who are using faster speeds to attract customers and creating kind of an expectation that service operates at a certain level, whether customers need it or not. Um, we also have, like I said, a lot of plans. And I think that when people sign up, if they're not really familiar with how broadband works, they're often asking us to tell them what they need without a lot of information. And having a lot of plans can be confusing for customers. And then, Dale, can you give like a brief outline of the residential retrofit and how this is potentially changing the way that we think of our lower tiers?
Sure. Residential retrofit is a program of the Mass Broadband Institute, which is the Commonwealth's arm for dealing with funding of internet-based grants. And as they look at the need to get equity in internet access, and they're looking at low-income housing that does not have enough internet access. They start with, what does the federal government consider the basic level for high-speed internet? And from like all of the broadband equity grants and so forth, the federal government is saying 100 megabits down, 100 megabits up is what they would expect to be the minimum for a high-speed internet service. So like if I want to get a grant from Massachusetts to provide internet service, that's the lowest level I have to provide for our customers. And as we look at the tiers that we have now, we have 2 tiers that are below that on the residential side. And we even have tiers below that on the business side. And when we look at our competitors, their tiers have gone way past that. Now our pricing is somewhat competitive, but it's definitely a challenge as we look at what Comcast is offering in the near term.
Why don't we pull that up? So this busy slide kind of shows the different plans that Comcast offers, and maybe Dale, you could walk us through just a couple key points from this.
Sure. So if you look at this, you've got the residential plans on the top and the business at the bottom. And if you look at the bottom 2 residential plans, this is kind of the history that we've dealt with as far as Comcast. Generally, they've had like 100 or 200 megabits downstream, but the most they've been able to offer upstream is 20 megabits. And that's been a real selling point for us because we offer symmetrical upstream bandwidth. They've recently upgraded their plants. I assume it's fairly recently because I looked at these numbers back in October and they weren't offering near the upstream bandwidth they are now. But most places in town, they are now offering for new customers upstream speeds of 150 megabits per second or 300 megabits per second. So now it's not symmetric. It's not like they have 1 gig down and 1 gig up, but 300 megabits is a lot of upstream bandwidth. And it's very hard for us to tell our customers that you're not going to have a good experience using the Comcast product that you would with ours. So that's one thing, but also you notice their lowest rate for residential is 400 meg down. Right, and if you remember, ours was 45, and the federal government is saying minimum should be 100. So that's one thing. Now they offer these introductory rates. They've got this 5-year locked-in introductory rate right now that is good through third week of June. And I suspect what's happened is they spent a lot of money upgrading their plant, and they want to get a lot of new customers in at these new rates. And I imagine that that 5-year intro is not going to last. But if you look at these regular prices, these are the ones that I think we need to be aligned with. Some of the other things that Comcast does, they reduce your rate if you get electronic bills, no paper bills, and you get automatic payment of your services. So these prices all include a $10 reduction, assuming you're doing that. These now plans, this is their lowest speed offering, and those plans are similar to what we offer in the sense that they are internet only, and you can't with those services combine a video service and a landline service and other things. It's internet only. They also require you to use refurbished equipment for that. So it's a way for them to, I don't know, extend the life of some of their older equipment, which wouldn't support the higher bandwidth here.
So let's
Wait,
talk a little
Dale,
bit
before
about.
you go
Sure.
on, could you go back to that slide? On the residential side on the right, what's post-intro EQ?
Equipment. So after the introductory period, they charge you $15 a month for the equipment. For businesses, they charge $24.95 a month for the equipment. And yeah, I mean,
Okay.
they have a different setup as far as equipment, but yeah.
So we are in the process of procuring a next generation system that will allow much higher speeds and a higher density of number of customers per strand of fiber that we have in town. This is called XGS PON, and we'll just call it next generation. And we also, our vendor Calix that makes all this equipment has a newer generation of in-home devices, the devices that customers actually would see and their devices would connect to. The ones that we're deploying are about a decade old. These new ones allow for a lot more services for customers. And what this means is that they could get benefits like parental controls or management of their device, and maybe security benefits, internet security benefits with these devices, and also have a more seamless kind of mesh solution. So one of the things that we encounter in Concord is people have a very large house, their Wi-Fi does not reach everywhere. Today, we're sending them to go purchase a piece of equipment to help manage that. It's not a great experience because it is not going to be integrated with the same vendor who makes the actual router or ONT that's in your house. And you're going to see slower speeds as a result of it. And if there's a problem with that mesh, we're not going to fix it for you. And if you're not tech savvy, we don't own it, then you're going to be kind of left to deal with that yourself. And that's an area where we want to improve. And it's an area where the Verizons and the Comcasts have already figured that out. Dale, do you want to add anything else on the next gen equipment?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. We'll be able to offer speeds up to, they call it 10 gig, but actual speed would be around 8.5 that a customer could receive. And so for business offerings, today our equipment tops out at 1 gig, and we can't offer higher than that. So this would allow us to do much higher tiers and to compete with Comcast, even at the residential level with the 1 gig and 2 gig services. And at the business level, we could go up to about 8.5 gig.
So the objectives that we have broadly are, number one, make sure that if there is a grant opportunity that we're not going to miss out on it. One of the big areas of focus for us is to try to get that fiber broadband completion to all areas of town. And some of those are going to be very costly because of the difficulty in undergrounding or private areas, multi-dwelling units that don't have easy access. So if there are grant opportunities, we would love to be able to take advantage of those. So, one of the options is in the short term, if there's a grant opportunity that we would like to, submit, having a tier that meets those minimum qualifications so that we can allow those customers to get on that tier and be eligible for the grant. Once we have the new equipment, that is the time that we will want to start aggressively marketing our new services, our new offerings, our higher speeds. And it may make sense to look at simplifying the tiers so that people don't have so many choices. And then, looking at those new services that we offer and how we do that. The new equipment is going to come with a cost. And I have a slide later on that as to the questions. So we have to figure out how all of these pieces come together. When it comes to how we get the message out, I'm not going to go into this too much, but similar to TOU, with these changes, the average customer could ignore this if it's noise. If they're happy with their charge and they're happy with their speed, they can ignore this. But we do need to think about how we get information out to customers about this. And so the last 2 slides I have here are just how we address some of the costs of this. So the good news is we did factor in this new next generation equipment into our budget. We've been depreciating the old equipment since we bought it. And so that's an expected cost. But the new equipment that goes in customer homes does cost more than the equipment today. And as you saw from the Comcast rates, they're charging people for that equipment. They know that it's expensive. They know that it breaks. They know that every so many years it needs to be replaced. So how do we do that? And then also the new equipment comes with, of course, like everything in our lives, a monthly recurring cost. It's probably under $3, but what we're seeing other people in our space do are one of 3 things. They either slightly increase all rates for everything, they add a separate charge for that, or they just absorb the cost and hope that through getting more business from these offerings that it makes up for the loss of revenue from paying for the higher equipment. When I talked about us kind of just giving you an overview and thinking about it, coming back, these are the questions that we'd love to get the board's thoughts on broadly. And then later, we can talk about the specifics of what that looks like. The last slide we have here is just how we move forward, right? So if we're talking about a consolidation of those plans, what does that look like for people who are on the old plan? What Comcast and other ISPs do is they allow people to sit at their tier indefinitely. If you're paying a ton of money for very slow internet and you don't notice or care, they're not going to call you and say, hey, guess what? We have a better plan for you and it's going to save you money and give you a better service. They let people sit there. And we don't necessarily feel that that's in line with our values. We feel like we're different than those ISPs and that we probably don't want to take that tack, but that's definitely a question that the board could help us with. Another thought that we had was using this new technology to actually allow for speed increases to every tier, which would allow us to not have to worry about that grandfathered thing. Everybody just is going to get a benefit, and then our offerings are more on par with what the other public ISPs offer. And then just this last point, if you'll remember last year, the board discussed a credit or a charge, depending on how you look at it, for either people who opt into paperless billing or people who require getting a paper bill, getting a charge for that bill, similar to what a lot of banks are doing. today. And so this topic, I think, is going to dovetail into that because there is a consideration and a question that the board needs to make and answer, which is when people incur costs, do we charge those people or do we charge everybody? If you require more expensive equipment, should we add a surcharge onto your bill or should we as an organization eat those costs? And those can be everything from the billing and the automatic payments and the bills, or it could be the equipment or the mesh solutions that you might offer. So at some point we need to draw the line because I think some people would agree we don't want to split hairs over a few pennies a month for something, but if somebody requires an extensive, unique solution and it's hundreds of dollars a month, we shouldn't let other customers subsidize that. So we have to kind of identify where that line is. So, Dale, any other remarks before I turn it back to the board for questions and comments?
No, I think you covered it well.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
Warren, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so let's hear from the board. Any comments on any of this? But let me just say one thing. I thought the board has previously said something about either charging for or giving a discount in terms of folks who require a paper bill.
Yeah, so where we had that discussion, and my recollection was that we needed to include the Public Works Commission because we bill for other utilities, and that the costs and the savings of this dovetail in between broadband, water, electric, sewer,
Yes.
pretty soon stormwater and curbside billing. So it's a more complex issue. I think the board did weigh in on kind of some general thoughts, but I think that we were only looking at a little piece of it, and now we need to kind of look at it from a broader perspective.
That's fair enough, but because the board has expressed an opinion on that, there are these other issues.
Yes,
Let's not
agreed.
talk
Agreed.
about that issue of paperless billing now, and you raise a lot of other questions. Brian?
Well, we're working on with TOU the display of the billing that we do send out. It would be helpful because I'm looking as I stepped away to go grab an existing bill. But the internet section, the ISP section of my bill simply states the month and the level of service and then the cost. It would be helpful to customers to get some understanding of their usage on their bill. So it could say either just a text that says this was the peak bandwidth you had as a demand this month, or you use, because it really, these numbers rely on peak demand, right? People don't really need to understand how many megabits they've sent and received over a month period because we don't bill based on that. But they really do need to understand, oh, I'm on a basic tier and I hit my 70 megabits as an upload or a download. To give them a sense of if they're hitting their peak, and then they can look back at previous bills and see, oh, well, out of 12 months, I hit my peak, 4 times. Maybe I should increase my plan. Or maybe I see that I'm on a 500 plan for a resident and I barely hit 100 and I'm kind of wasting money. So maybe I should adjust accordingly. But they don't have that visibility. So I think putting that information in the bill is one thing. I do think that having 6 different tiers is quite a lot for a resident or for a business. And it's really hard for me to understand Comcast compared to Concord in pricing because they have such elaborate schemes going on at Comcast.
Yeah.
I do think that, I like those now plans, the sense that there are these, I just need to check my email, or, I just need basic website usage. I don't do streaming, I don't do other things. So I think a plan like that should remain, but then when we do talk about our existing plans to have something that meets the federal minimum, and then to have those more elaborate competitive Comcast plans for residents. But for businesses, I think I don't see a need for such a now plan for businesses, something that's like super slow and super cheap. And that's the other thing with the now competitive plan is that I think our minimum is $50 a month. Seeing if we can lower that for one of these really slow plans, such that if someone doesn't have to spend $50 a month only to check email. We do have some residents that, they're not tech savvy. And then as the next comment is about going into the home and offering Wi-Fi. I know I went through the process Jason talked about. It is frustrating. It is a huge learning curve to figure out how to, put in a router, get repeaters, and connect everything. But now that I've done it, it's great. And I can see how customers will ask for that, but I can also see how it complicates customer service at Concord Light, where we're now in the home versus connecting to the home. And that adds a lot of complexity to how we engage with our customers. So I just want to thoughtfully approach those services. And as for people who buy into that, having an additional charge on the bill, I think that is appropriate because that equipment, that service support is that customer is requesting it. It's not all customers, so it shouldn't necessarily be a shared cost. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Those are useful. John or Bianca, anything you want to weigh in on?
I guess the only thing I would add is I'm supportive of the approach that Jason suggested of differentiating between customers to the degree that they do require a solution that requires higher costs. And yeah, there's a question here in terms of what the appropriate threshold is. But I would, leave that to others to decide, but very supportive of kind of recognizing that if a customer requires unique solutions and there's a higher cost associated with that, let's make sure that their charges reflect that.
Good.
And
And
can I
Dale, go on.
make a comment? It seems like on the electric side, there's an understanding that businesses subsidize residents somewhat. Is that something that we should be thinking about on the broadband side? As I look at our rates for businesses, that's the one place I see where I think it makes some sense to raise some of those rates. And we would still be very competitive with Comcast raising some of the business rates, where the residential rates, I think we're going to have to look at some downward adjustments.
Okay, no, that's definitely worth considering. And I tend to support the comments from both John and Brian. Especially I'm in favor of reducing the number of different rates. And in terms of how you deal with grandfathering people, it's almost like we'd have to do scenario analysis of typical customers, first of all, and then second, Jason, you were raising the scenario where we make some changes and what happens if too many people then lower their tier to a lower tier and we've lost a lot of revenue. To some extent, I'd like to see the numbers. Is it a question of if 5% lower their tier, that would cause serious financial problems for us, or is it 55%? So, what is the fear there, Brian?
So Dale, you said that we had room to kind of raise the commercial rates, but not so much with the residential rates. as I look at the rates, we have 150 150 for $75 for residents, and we had the same offering for $90 a month for business. Now, I understand businesses need a lot more support, and there's other reasons to have a higher rate. But when you look at the Comcast, they don't have the same speeds listed for residents and for businesses, and that makes them harder to compare. And for the casual observer, that makes it easy to argue for a business to argue, why is my rate so high when residents get the same thing for less? And with businesses, it's harder to start that argument because they're different numbers. So we may want to adjust our speeds and have them different for the different resident versus business, just so that
Yes,
it's more difficult to understand because we can avoid the defend starting a conversation to customer service on defense
yeah.
rather than trying to help.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that, and there are other advantages where you can look at a rate and tell based on the rate, is this a resident plan or a commercial plan? Yeah, and I do notice the Comcast does that, but if you look at the lowest plan for Comcast business, that is much lower than the lowest plan for residential, and you pay more.
Yeah.
And our lowest plan, so if we were to raise our tiers and keep the pricing the same, our lowest plan would be, I think, the price too low on the business side. Where on the residential side, they've got these introductory rates of 55 and 40. To offer, like I can't see us raising our lowest rate to 400. I could see us having a 100, right? Where now we have a 45 and a 70.
And it
But
might be,
But
yeah, we
can I
gotta,
say one thing here, and then I think we probably need to, and
one more comment.
go on, Brian.
Yeah, I just think it would be good for us when we list on the website our pricing to list out the equipment lease as zero.
Mhm.
Because people are comparing us
That's
to
a good,
other
that's a good
providers.
idea.
Yeah.
And that gets to the point I was going to make for business. The real comparison that they should be able to make easily is not between residential and business. The real comparison they should be able to make easily is their business decision is between our service and Comcast. That's their real choice. And we should make it as easy as possible for them to compare that. And we should make sure that ours is a favorable choice when they make that comparison.
Yeah. I mean, there are other differences. Comcast, for example, forces you, if you're at a particular address, you have to get a business plan. We don't do that, right? We offer faster turnaround time for if somebody's equipment or service goes out for business customers, residential. But if you're in a business district and you're willing to accept our residential terms, then we allow you to go with that. But, that's another thing that we could talk about changing. I don't know if I think what we're doing now is better than what Comcast does.
Good, good. Thank you. Bianca, you get the last word.
I agree. I mean, we couldn't get out of Comcast fast enough. We even had to we had to go through it. Being away from the street, we had to drill our own wire, and we couldn't do that fast enough to get away from Comcast. I you know, for me, it's just, and just about everyone I know, just, you know, if you can get on CMLP's broadband, that's where people are.
Yeah,
On the phone service side of things, I just thought I'd mention, I know that that's something that people want, and maybe that's a reason people might stick with Comcast. And I don't know if it'd be a partnership or just an FYI, but we have an UMA phone. I don't know if you guys are familiar with UMA. It's OOMA. My neighbor had recommended it. Basically, it's just a device you plug into the router and you have internet phone. And it's free. You just have to pay, I think it's $100 for the device, and then you have to pay the taxes on phone calls.
yeah.
From the FCC, but it's literally, I think we pay less than $5 a month, because there's a flat tax that goes with it. And that's it, you know, and then you can just dial away. So anyway, just, I don't know if that makes any sense to inform people of, but
Yeah,
there's
when people
options.
ask us, that's one of our go-tos.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
That's it.
Well, thanks. We need to move on. And Laura, you know, we're running a little behind schedule here. Laura, do you want to handle the power options really quickly, or do you
Yeah,
want to wait till
it's
next
not
month?
gonna take long. It's exactly
Okay,
one
great.
slide. So, E&E is in various stages of negotiating some power purchase agreements, and Jason and I both felt it was important to make you aware of some of the options out there, even if price-wise, they're not currently very good. Just to keep you apprised of what is available, and you may surprise us that there's one or more of these you want to take a closer look at. But Jason, if you could go to the next slide. So there are 4 projects that they would like to know if we are interested in saying that we would like to take output from, because as they move on with their negotiations, they need to have an idea of how much volume they can offer to the developer, which is made up of all the MLPs. So they need to know which MLPs are in and which are out. So there are 2 existing projects that would have terms of 5 to 10 years, and 2 new projects that would have terms of 25 years. The one of the existing ones, the hydro, would be coming in from New York. We don't have any information on this. It's in very early stages of negotiation. So we don't have a price and we don't have a specific term, but it's looking like it would be between 5 and 10 years. That hydro could be cost effective. So to the extent we get some more information about that project, I think we would say we are interested at least in hearing what the terms are. The other ones are harder. The cheapest one of these on the face of it is the existing wind up. It's way up in Maine on the border with Canada. And one of the reasons it's cheaper is because, well, it's existing, number one, but number two, there's a lot of uncertainty and risk associated with this project. That location not infrequently detaches itself from the pricing that's going on in Massachusetts, to the extent where that project could be trading at $100 a megawatt hour discount to what's going on at the Massachusetts hub. And if we buy production way up there, we would be subject to that cost. We would, and so it's not great for that reason. The other 2 are more interesting, the new wind and the new solar. They're both a similar price, and I'll just tell you, they're high, and they're much higher than anything in our portfolio currently. Well, much higher. They're significantly higher than anything in our portfolio currently. You know, the big backdrop here is that all these power plant developers and owners know that pretty much nothing is going to be built in the next 4 years, okay, and possibly longer. And so they feel like they're holding all the cards. They've all raised their prices, you know, by 50 to 100%. I mean, it's kind of crazy out there, like how high the prices are. But of the 2 projects, the new wind would be better. It has a similar price, but it's got a much more valuable load shape to it. Like the wind comes when we need it. It comes in the winter when it's more valuable. You know, the solar kind of adds to our current solar saturation problem. So if we were to say, yes, we want to support new wind development, then we would say that we wanted to take a look at this one that's in mid-Maine. It's actually fairly near one of the other wind projects we own output from called Rox Wind. It would come with energy and class 1 RECs. As I said, it would be 25-year term. There is some basis risk compared to Mass Hub, meaning the price tends to trade at a discount to Mass Hub, but it's much more manageable, much less unreliable than the one up in northern Maine. So it's expensive, but if the board said, hey, we really want to go all in on supporting new build out at this time, this is what it would take to support that, is agreeing to a price that's much higher than what's in our portfolio. And we'll save it for next time, but I'll give you a sneak preview that the Q1 MWEC rate comparisons came out, and it's looking very ugly for Concord. We moved up in the list significantly. So we are, you know, very close to the top now in almost all the categories. So, you know, buying into one of these would add further upward pressure. And that's really all I wanted to present, is make you aware of these, maybe get some feedback on, you know, how strong our appetite is to pursue new wind, even if it's costly.
Laura, the one question I would have would be, you know, when you talk about appetite is, you know, need, and just an understanding, right, of where we are in terms of our overall requirements, recognizing that the objective is to kind of have, you know, 80% of our requirements under contract and about 20% subject to the spot market. It just, yeah.
Yeah, so between now and 2030, we have close to 80% hedged, assuming Mason Bay gets built. If it doesn't get built, it drops down to about, excuse me, 75%. But starting in 2030, you know, our numbers drop down into the 60% range. So there definitely is room starting in 2030. And this new wind would probably commence they say mid 2026. I think that's optimistic. So call it 2027.
Thank you. Brian?
The hydro I'm very interested in. The solar is exaggerating our current local issues. The existing wind, I don't like the cost associated with that when it doesn't work. I like supporting new projects, but I don't. We've done that a few times, and you're right. Our prices are creeping up because of it, especially with the nuclear gouging us for more money. So I think I'm only hydro supporting right now.
Yeah, I don't know about the hydro, but I'm not enthusiastic about these other projects. I think there's nothing wrong with us meeting our climate change goals by purchasing RECs on the open market if we need to. The reason not to do that is to support the development of new projects that wouldn't otherwise get built, but it shouldn't be done in a way that's just providing windfall profits to developers. And that's what it seems like is happening with these new projects here. They're seeing an opportunity to gouge the customer, and we don't need to be part of that. I don't know if anybody else has comments. Let's turn to public comments. I don't know first whether Cameron or Colin have anything they would like to say. Not hearing anything. Any other public comments? Jim Terry.
Thank you, Warden. My questions are regarding the proposed bill outlet. I've been frustrated in that a bill for April is actually for my use during March, and that's been a frustration forever. I hope that when we go to time of use, that in fact, a bill for the month of December is for the usage for the month of December. And that one of the things that happened is that my usage for the month of December was based on the new rates for January of 2025. And that's always been a frustration. I also have a heat pump so that there is time when the heat pump is in a special rate, otherwise it's in the R1 rate. And that goes by the correct time, but it's not in the right month description. So I hope that in the future, the board will consider making the bills say what they do. When the bill says March 1st through April 1st, I believe it should say March 1st through March 31st. There's still only 31 days, but my April bill says it has 31 days, but there's no 31 days in April. There's 31 days in March. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
No, thank you. We don't have time, and I don't understand exactly how this is done, but I would like the staff, if you could address that in a future meeting, that would be helpful to clarify that. Pamela Dritt.
Pamela, 13 Concord Green. I worry that we don't I worry that we have the wrong goals. I don't think simplicity should be a goal. Clarity should. Simply presenting complex information is a goal, but not simplifying the information, leaving it out so that we don't present it at all. That looks like we've got something to hide, and it treats us customers as children, like you're trying to protect us from the complexity and confusing information, like we wouldn't understand it. And I think it would be better to aim at informed customers, so that we get all the information transparently and clearly displayed, not simplicity. For example, our current bill, the energy use comparison with the string of Pop B bubbles, it doesn't show us anything on first look that's useful. Why were those things put in the bubbles and compared to what? Whereas the graph, the kilowatt hour graph, couldn't we add a previous, is very good because it shows a lot of information in a display that is complex but simple to read and understand, very clear. And they say we couldn't get a previous year's comparison on that chart, but couldn't you just use a single black line for last year's information? You don't need it in the complexity of what the time of use parts were, and say a blue line going through it for the 2 years ago data. There's a science to displaying information clearly, and we should be state of the art for that, for things like our bills, so that we get as much information out to the public as possible, for two reasons. One, we want it to influence people's behavior, and if they don't know what is the influences, they won't be able to change. And I forget what the second one was.
Okay, well, thank you, Pamela. Those are good. Your emphasis on the word clarity that's a very good word for us to keep in mind.
And
Thank you. So I need to cut. We're late. Now can we have an emotion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second,
Bianca,
yes.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and I say yes as well. Thanks, everybody, for an informative meeting, and we'll see you next month. See you now. Bye.